Blood is thicker than water. That is the lie they fed you. You were conditioned from childhood to believe that family is your ultimate sanctuary, your permanent refuge in a hostile world. The only people who will unconditionally protect your secrets, your flaws, and your dreams. It is a beautiful delusion, polished by sentiment and repeated until it felt sacred. But Niccolò Machiavelli understood a far more unsettling reality. Your family is the most sophisticated intelligence network you will ever encounter. They have studied you since birth. They possess your history, your weaknesses, your patterns of fear and desire. And because they share your blood, they feel entitled to your access. They do not interpret your boundaries as self-respect. They interpret them as betrayal. There are specific categories of information that must never cross that perimeter. Share the wrong detail and you do not merely lose privacy. You surrender leverage. You hand over the blade that can be used to dissect your confidence, your ambition, and eventually your autonomy. Let them believe they understand you. Let them assume they have full visibility. But never give them the blueprint of your next evolution. We begin with the most volatile asset you possess, the architecture of your escape. Never announce your ultimate ambition. Never reveal the full scale of your financial ascent. Never disclose your precise strategy for total independence. You assume your family wants you to succeed. They do, but only within the limits of the role they assigned you. Family systems operate as homeostatic organisms. They crave equilibrium. Each member is unconsciously cast into a character, the achiever, the caretaker, the disappointment, the rebel. The system stabilizes itself around those identities. The moment you begin to transcend the script, you destabilize the organism. If you announce that you are building serious wealth, relocating internationally, severing dependencies, or redefining your status, they will not experience pure pride. They will experience threat. Your freedom feels like abandonment. Your growth feels like indictment. They will attempt to restrain you, not with overt hostility, but with subtle resistance disguised as love. Are you sure that investment is safe? You seem different lately. We just do not want to see you fail. Listen carefully to the tone. Concern becomes containment. Protection becomes control. History offers a masterclass in this principle. Consider Cosimo de' Medici, the architect of a dynasty that dominated Renaissance Florence. His wealth was staggering. His political influence reached into the Vatican and the Republic alike. Yet he presented himself with calculated modesty. Plain clothing. Restrained displays of luxury. A public image designed to reduce envy. He understood that envy flourishes most violently among equals. Between brothers. Between cousins. Between those who measure themselves against your rise. When you expose your grand strategy, you ignite silent comparison. Your success becomes a mirror reflecting their stagnation. And most people do not thank the mirror. They attempt to shatter it. Stop seeking permission to evolve. The powerful execute quietly. They do not convene family councils to request approval. Conceal your next move. Smile at gatherings. Speak in generalities. By the time they understand you have outgrown the cage, you should already be airborne. The second revelation is even more dangerous, the map of your unhealed wounds. Modern culture romanticizes radical emotional transparency. It promises that if you sit your parents down and detail every psychological injury, healing will follow. This is naive. When you hand someone the coordinates of your deepest insecurities, you are not guaranteeing compassion. You are identifying pressure points. In The Prince warns rulers about fortresses that become prisons. When you expose your vulnerabilities to those embedded in a tense emotional system, you may believe you are building intimacy. In reality, you are revealing where the walls are weakest. Conflict is inevitable in any family. When emotions escalate, human beings default to primal weaponry. If you have confessed that you fear abandonment or struggle with inadequacy, those words can reappear years later during an argument, sharpened and aimed precisely at the scar. A stranger's insult can be dismissed. A relative's attack penetrates because it carries historical authority. They know which memory still stings. They know which insecurity still echoes. Emotional sovereignty requires discipline. Heal your trauma in spaces designed for healing. Work with professionals bound by confidentiality. Build resilience through disciplined habits. Journal privately. Strengthen your body. Refine your mind. But do not expect those who participated in your wounds to suddenly become neutral surgeons. When interacting with family, offer curated transparency. I had a difficult week, but I handled it. That is sufficient. You are not obligated to provide raw data. The individual who cannot be emotionally provoked cannot be easily controlled. When you become less decipherable, the system loses leverage. The third category is your romantic alliance. Never vent to your family about your partner's flaws. Never narrate intimate conflicts. Anger is temporary. But the narrative you create in another person's mind can become permanent. When you argue with your partner, emotions surge and you seek an ally. You call home. You list grievances. You portray yourself as wronged. Days later, reconciliation occurs. Forgiveness restores the bond. But your family does not possess your emotional investment. They do not experience the reconciliation. They archive the accusation. This dynamic, often described as triangulation in psychology, corrodes long-term stability. Once your family views your partner as incompetent, disrespectful, or untrustworthy, that lens rarely dissolves. Every holiday becomes subtly charged. Every disagreement reactivates their earlier judgment. You have invited external opinion into a private domain. Authority in adult life is measured by autonomy. Intelligence professionals such as Joe Navarro emphasize that confidence is communicated through boundary enforcement. When you handle relationship conflicts internally and present unified stability externally, you command respect. If the partnership fails, exit decisively. But do not outsource the governance of your household to those who cannot remain neutral. The fourth revelation concerns ideological evolution. As you mature, your worldview may diverge sharply from the doctrines of your upbringing. Religious convictions may shift. Political alignments may reverse. Career philosophies may transform. Publicly announcing that their foundational beliefs are misguided rarely produces enlightenment. It produces ego defense. In the 33 strategies of war, strategic conflict is framed as a calculation of energy. Why squander psychological capital on debates that cannot be won? Belief systems anchored in identity are not dismantled by dinner table logic. When you declare ideological independence, many will interpret it as moral superiority. Resistance escalates. Arguments become cyclical and draining. Strategic restraint preserves energy. Live your convictions quietly. Execute your chosen path without theatrical declarations. In the 48 Laws of Power, Law 3 instructs you to conceal intentions. Blend when necessary. Nod politely. Allow others their narratives while you build your reality in silence. Internal freedom does not require external confrontation. The fifth revelation is your hidden treasury. Never disclose the precise scale of your financial reserves. Do not advertise emergency funds. Do not outline contingency plans. When surplus becomes visible, expectations mutate. Subconsciously, others recalibrate their risk tolerance around your buffer. Why endure discomfort if you can subsidize relief? Why budget carefully if your success exists as a fallback? Financial psychology reveals uncomfortable truths. As Machiavelli observed, people forget injuries more quickly than financial losses. Money activates primal circuitry. It can distort loyalty and intensify entitlement. Requests will rarely appear aggressive. They arrive cloaked as crises. A temporary shortfall. A unique opportunity. A medical concern exaggerated into urgency. Refusal triggers moral accusation. You are reminded of sacrifices made on your behalf. Past caregiving is reframed as debt. Historical banking dynasties such as the Medici understood discretion. Capital concealed is capital protected. Project stability, not abundance. Discuss inflation. Mention obligations. Create ambiguity around liquidity. You are not obligated to become a perpetual safety net. Preserving boundaries financially often preserves relationships emotionally. The sixth revelation is the graveyard of your regrets. There exists a powerful urge to confess every moral compromise, every strategic ruthlessness, every ethically ambiguous victory. You crave absolution. You want unconditional acceptance. But family is rarely a confessional booth. It is an enduring jury. Once a damaging narrative enters their perception, it rarely disappears. Consider how reputations were destroyed through extracted confessions in medieval courts. The record itself became condemnation. In personal life, the same mechanism applies. Family members often hold a static avatar of who you are, frozen in adolescence. Introduce evidence of calculated ruthlessness and that avatar fractures. From that point forward, disagreements are filtered through suspicion. Success is attributed to manipulation. Authority is questioned. Machiavelli advised rulers to appear virtuous even when necessity required harsh decisions. Image stabilizes power. In private, reflect honestly. Seek counsel where confidentiality is guaranteed. But do not burden your relatives with every shadow in your history. Allow them a simplified narrative that preserves functional trust. The seventh and final revelation is your awareness of the system itself. As you study psychology, power, and behavioral dynamics, patterns become visible. You recognize guilt tactics. You identify favoritism. You see the subtle exchanges of control. The temptation to expose the mechanism is intense. You want to announce that you see the game. Resist it. In dysfunctional systems, the one who names the dysfunction often becomes the problem. Clinical psychology refers to this as the identified patient phenomenon. The system deflects responsibility by targeting the whistleblower. Gaslighting intensifies. Alliances consolidate against you. Your insight is reframed as arrogance. Strategists in volatile political courts survive not by public denunciation, but by quiet maneuvering. Observe. Enforce boundaries calmly. Decline invitations to drama without explanation. When guilt is deployed, respond with measured firmness. I understand your concern. My decision stands. You do not need to lecture about manipulation. You neutralize it through non-participation. This architecture of restraint is not cruelty. It is preservation. Total exposure breeds resentment. Chronic resentment breeds estrangement. By regulating information flow, you reduce friction. Interactions become lighter because they are no longer arenas of extraction. You accept your family as limited human beings rather than mythical guardians. You stop demanding what they cannot supply. Emotional detachment in this context does not extinguish love. It refines it. You transition from reactive child to sovereign adult. Borders are defined. Diplomacy remains courteous. You are no longer entangled, you are navigating. And now the final question emerges. If survival requires such disciplined boundaries, what does that reveal about the narratives you inherited? Are you living inside an unquestioned structure, or are you consciously designing your own? Power begins the moment illusion dissolves. Once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. The choice is no longer whether the system influences you. The choice is whether you influence yourself with equal intensity.